You probably have heard Prince Charles is no longer Prince Charles. He's King Charles, and he has a Queen Camilla, and he was coronated yesterday at Westminster Abbey in the United Kingdom, in England. And it's a pretty exciting event. A lot of people who are English of heritage are pretty thrilled about it. Even people who are Canadian heritage are thrilled about it. In front of you, you can see the invitation that was sent out to celebrate the coronation of King Charles. And this is a coronation that occurred 70 years after the coronation of his mother, Queen Elizabeth. She was coronated in 1953, and this coronation just occurred now in 2023. May 7th of 2023, to be exact, is today. Yesterday was the coronation, May 6th of 2023. And it was a pretty phenomenal affair. Now, the interesting thing is I was noticing a few things about the invitation itself, and others have noticed this as well, so I'm not alone in my observations. But you're going to notice there this little green man at the bottom of the invitation. Apparently, that little green man is an ancient figure from British folklore from back in the time when they were pagans. So there's a connection on the invitation to a pagan sort of green man. And you're also going to see the coats of arms up at the top left and the top right corners. And so the coats of arms are also something that you can spot on the invitation. Now, the interesting thing about this coat of arms is on the left side, it represents Camilla. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, left side represents King Charles, coat of arms. The right side represents Camilla. Now, you're going to notice the animals that are in this coat of arms. So we have the lion, and the lion is wearing the crown. And of course, that's representative of the King of England as a lion, a mighty lion. Of course, Jesus is the Lion of Judah. So many times lions have a significantly positive association. Also, there's significant negative associations with a lion. For example, the lion is representative of the ancient god or goddess Ishtar. And this ancient god was the goddess of fertility, of love, of war, and of sex. And apparently, this particular god is somewhat non-binary, sometimes female, sometimes male, celebrating people in the temple way, way back in the Babylonian times. There were all kinds of ancient rituals in the temple, which were pretty ghastly. According to today's standards, they would have people dancing around. They celebrated all kinds of really awful sexual perversions, but I digress. Anyway, so then you're going to see on the right-hand side of the first coat of arms, there is a unicorn. And the unicorn probably represents good luck. You can also see the harp, that's representing Ireland. And we also have the dragon on the far right-hand side. Now, this dragon is on the Camilla set of coat of arms. You're also going to see a boar, a wild boar on Camilla's coat of arms. You can see that down there on the right. And the interesting thing about the dragon, that blue dragon, is that it can be associated in a way with some negative things as well. For example, the dragon could be associated with the dragon that's in the book of Revelation. And so that's a concern. In fact, sometimes the Welsh culture talks about a red dragon. Apparently, the red dragon is symbolic of some of the Welsh culture, and that goes back to very ancient times. And the interesting thing is it correlates with Revelation 12 when we had the giant red dragon representing Satan. So there's some kind of interesting things, but let's hear why I titled the video the way I did. In case you're wondering why God reigned on King Charles Parade. Well, here's the answer. These people here are pagans. Now, within the pagan framework, some call themselves witches, or from the Wiccan faith. The witches, Wiccans, and pagans, those are groups that have grown significantly over in the United Kingdom. In fact, a 2022 census in the United Kingdom says that less than half of UK people identify as Christian, and this is coming from The Guardian, and 74,000 people identify as pagan. Since 2011, the pagan associations have risen by 17,000. Now, 0.3% of people in the United States consider themselves either pagan or Wiccan, and that's according to the Pew polls, and that's 1 million people. So what do these people do? What do pagans do? Well, let's see what these pagans did. These pagans very much desired that it was going to be sunny on King Charles's coronation date. It was very important to them. So they conducted a number of spells. They conducted rituals. They lit blue, red, and white candles with certain symbolism, and they scattered rose petals. So they did a number of different things to try to conjure up their gods, pagan gods, and there's a number of different gods associated with pagan, from Mother Nature to trees and other sorts of worship, or just worship of various types of gods. But they wanted to conjure up the gods to make sure it didn't rain on King Charles's parade. Here's what it says in The Sun about what they did. And the witches have already begun casting spells. Now, this particular issue came out a while ago, not too long ago. It says casting spells to ensure good weather for King Charles's big day. Quote, "We're all doing spells at the moment for good weather," pagan witch and main organizer Julie Aspinall, 58, told The Sun. "I'm doing a spell every day for good weather. It doesn't have to be boiling hot, just no rain. And so far, the forecast is no rain, so I'll keep doing it." The coronation ritual will take place at the Festival of Witches and Pagans, being held in Coventry over Coronation weekend. More than 2,000 people are expected to attend the event, which will feature a range of workshops and rituals from wand making to crystal skull healing. This is tapping into the underworld. It's a very, very dangerous practice. It's really no different than using Ouija boards or using tarot cards or doing any of that kind of thing. You're tapping into the underworld, and that's demonic, and you don't want to do that. So it says the event had been organized by Julie and her coven, the Coven of Gaia, who said that King Charles had always been very supportive of the pagan community. Quote, "We know King Charles is the head of the Church of England, but to us, he's very pagan in his beliefs too." Here's what else they said. "I do a ritual to Hecate, the goddess of the underworld, and she helps you if you are at a crossroads in your life and don't know which path to take. We'll do a supper, a meditation, and then we'll leave an offering at a crossroads." Notice the interesting correspondence of the word offering. Who do we leave offerings to? Well, we leave offerings to the true Lord, the King of Kings, the God Almighty, Jesus Christ. We don't leave offerings for the underworld. Here's another quote. "Witchcraft and paganism are becoming so much more popular. People are looking back to the old ways because they are not happy with this life. After lockdown, people began to turn to it more and more. They've stopped believing what they are being told by the churches. We are nature-based. We are trying to take care of Mother Earth and live in it peacefully. What you see is what you get with us, and people like that. We have a slower way of life. People need that. They need to slow down. People are also less about making money and more about having a happy life. We get lots of walk-ins on the day, and they just want to have a look and a feel for it. It's a very peaceful place. As well as the King Charles ritual, the festival will have dozens of workshops, including broomstick making for kids, Viking demonstrations, rune and tarot reading, and special nighttime events. There will be lots of workshops about witchcraft and paganism. This is very dangerous. And this goes back to a popularity driven by people like J.K. Rowling's. J.K. Rowling's was once quite at favor with the demonic realm. And she was in favor when she came out with her Harry Potter series, which of course is tapping into the amazing world of wizardry. You remember the amazing world of Harry Potter and the wizardry in that? Well, it's tapping into a different dimension. And one of the reasons why her books became so incredibly popular and so well sold is she had the help of the prince of this world, who is the king of the realm in which we live, Jesus. It's interesting because when you talk about kings, and before I get into what happened to King Charles, let's think about the history of the kings of Israel. So Samuel passed down the idea to Saul. Saul was the first king of Israel, and this is around 1,000 years BC. And following Saul came David, and God promised David a line, the line through his dad Jesse, and it was going to go all the way down. The stump was going to appear according to the book of Isaiah, and the kingly line God's line, the messianic line, was going to come through the line of David. He wanted to build a temple to God, the first temple, but he wasn't able to. He was promised the line within his lineage, but he was not promised to be able to build a temple. His son Solomon ended up building the temple. Interestingly, by the time Herod came into power, the same Herod who was in power when Jesus was born, the line was not Davidic. The kingly line that Herod came from had lost the Davidic branch. Okay. So what happened was people at that point were wondering, where is the kingly line of Israel? They had lost it. It was not safe to be of the Israel line of kings because you could see what would happen. Look what Herod did when he slaughtered all of the young children under 2, believing that this person who was going to be born was going to compete against him. So the kingly line had gone into hiding. And then it was exposed in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke. We can see the trace of Joseph's and Mary's line. Okay, Joseph is the legal father of Jesus. And of course, his blood father is the God of heaven, the Father. And the mother, we can also see that line in the book of Luke. So we can see that kind of stuff. We can see where Jesus came from. He is the only king. Interestingly, if you've ever seen a cross, it's a crucifixion that shows the crucifixion and shows Jesus on the cross. They call that the crucifix. The Catholic faith has that out quite frequently. And at the top of the cross, it says INRI, I-N-R-I. That's an abbreviation. And it's abbreviated in 3 different languages, Greek, Hebrew, and Latin. And it says, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. That was what Pilate had directed. Pilate asked Jesus who he was. And he says he is not of this world. Of course, his kingdom is of another world. And that's a kingdom we should all be seeking. So I'm going to get back to King Charles right now. Let's take a look at King Charles and see if these pagan witches were successful in their mission to bring sunlight and a beautiful day. Now, there is a challenge. I will point out that, of course, people are going to say, well, the forecast in the United Kingdom is usually pretty awful. The weather there is not really good. In fact, it rains a lot there. And in May, apparently, they expect to have very rainy days, between 6 and 8 days in the month of May. They expect that. They expect to have some form of precipitation between 14 and 15 days in the month of May. So you can see that it's about half chance of having no rain at all in the month of May. But to have a fully rainy day that would be an absolute dump of rain, that would be something that is pretty less frequent, between 6 and 8 days. So if this particular day, which was forecasted, as a pagan said, it was forecasted to be sunny, if it rained, could it be a sign that God is telling us that he doesn't appreciate paganism? And he's showing us who the true Lord of Lords and King of Kings is? I think so. I would say so. You can see the interesting thing here is at Queen Elizabeth's coronation, it also rained pretty heavily. Her coronation was in June of 1953, and it rained heavily that day too. And then it rained heavily all day. King Charles, everyone was dressed. Here's Queen Elizabeth's coronation. You can see all the umbrellas. Everyone's out there watching her coronation in the rain. Watching her head to the coronation, I should say. Same thing with King Charles. Lots and lots of rain. And you can see right here, Sunday's weather makes a welcome change from yesterday. That's today. This was written in the paper today. It says Sunday's weather is sunny there apparently now, which saw rain-soaked members of the public wearing ponchos as they attend the coronation. So you can see what's going on. People were getting rained on. God is saying, sorry, pagans, your little witch spells and witchcraft is very ineffective. Made a fool out of them, essentially. So I watched the coronation, and it really was rather beautiful, to be honest. You can see right here the crosses, many, many crosses, candles, Christian symbols all throughout. Christian messages were woven throughout too. And so King Charles mentioned Jesus' name quite a few times. He said he wasn't here to be served, but to serve. He repeated that over and over and over. And that's something that goes back to a very long tradition in coronations in English history. But it's also very reminiscent of what Jesus said in the Bible when he washed the feet of his apostles. And he said how he had come to serve. And that's what he did. And so Charles is essentially aligning himself up with Jesus and asking for the blessings of Jesus. And people who were coronating him said, God save the king. Kept saying that, said it a few times. God save the king. And they gave him the sign with a cross on it. As you can see after that, they gave him a few other symbolic instruments to use. And it just follows. So here's exactly one place where the king had a crown on his head. And it says, God save the king. That's what they said. That's exactly when they said it. And following him, Prince William got up there and made a few pretty impressive words. You can see Camilla there in the background. And you could also see his grandson and granddaughter. So we see in Jesus Christ our Lord, something that King Charles said. It's interesting because they fortunately in the United Kingdom still retain the traditions of Christianity. That's not gone. They may have left the Catholic Church, as they did. The kingly line right now is from the Church of England, and they broke off under King Henry VIII because the Pope was not going to annul his marriage. And so he decided to break off and form the Church of England, which is where the royal line is in charge. So it's something really important. Now, the interesting thing is Prince Charles, formerly Prince Charles, now King Charles, is not the Grand Master, by the way, of the group that is, I'm forgetting what the name of the group that I was going to say. So let me just think about this for a second. The Masonic, the Freemasons. So he's not the Grand Master of the Freemasons. There is somebody in his line, Prince Edward, who is the Grand Master of the Freemasons. It's good that they don't get too associated with the Freemasons because the Freemasons in their 32 degrees do try to align themselves in the final degrees towards Satan, and it's not something that's very safe. Fortunately, he knows enough not to do that. I have a lot of respect for his mother, Queen Elizabeth. I think she lived a very good life. She was a great example to people of what it takes to face challenges, face traumatic times, face difficulties, always with a brave look on her face. And he tended to think that way too. And so he's retaining Christianity. We see the Christian values just really seeping through this entire thing. And you can see right here, just to get a visual, I was curious to see if any rainbows appeared during the coronation, sort of like a sign from God of approval, perhaps. And I didn't see any rainbows. In fact, it was just sort of gloomy and rainy all day long. And perhaps it was because God did not want those pagans to think that they had succeeded in any way with any sort of sunshine showing through the clouds. He didn't want to show them that on the day because the pagans are unfortunately not in alignment with what God wants. And so that is something that's pretty important. So I want to say hi to people in the chat. So I see that Captive Desk and Diagorus of Melos, and I want to say hi to you guys. And also Slam RN. If you're still there, that's good to see you too. So hopefully you guys are having a great day and you've enjoyed watching this coronation. I think it was a really interesting thing to watch. I love the fact that they've retained a lot of their history in the coronation. I do think the pagan thing, though, is kind of interesting. So you saw at the outset when I talked about the green man, the pagan green man is something that goes back really deep into English history. Again, it's from their folklore. It's interesting that's featured on there, and why it's featured on there is a question, but I think it might be because of Charles' affiliation with nature. He appreciates nature and the earth, and he has been involved in causes where they're talking about trying to make the world a better place to live and to worry about our environment and those kind of things. But on the other hand, King Charles also has associations with the World Economic Forum. And the World Economic Forum is a pretty scary little group of people. These are very wealthy business people. They want to have a form of capitalism that focuses on big business power. They would love to achieve a one world government. They would love the idea of a single currency because that could give them power. They love the idea of video surveillance. And you can hear Klaus Schwab and others in the World Economic Forum fantasizing about the idea of 2030 Nobody will have anything and everyone will be happy. The idea is, of course, not that nobody will have anything in 2030. It's that the poor people, the paupers of the world, the middle class or the lower class will not have anything. They will be renting everything, renting things, even like your clothes and your home and your car and any other sorts of possessions that you would have, anything that could actually help your financial wealth. They want you renting because they want you indebted to the upper class. That is the plan. And so in their quest to push through that plan, they like the idea that the US economy is very much in shambles. They like the idea that we're $31 trillion in debt here in the United States. They think that's fine. Why would they like that? Well, because they want to get rid of the power of the US dollar. They don't like the idea of people paying in cash because when you pay in cash, the government can't spy on you to see what you're doing. You could buy whatever you want and no one's going to know it. So if you decide you want to go out and buy yourself a bottle of wine, the government doesn't need to know that you just went out and bought yourself a bottle of wine. Or if you go out and you want to buy yourself some cigarettes, the government does not even need to know that. Okay, so that's an issue. And so that's just something that's out there. If they can weaken the dollar and force us into some other form of currency where they can much more monitor you, that would be an ideal. And that's something that's an ideal under the World Economic Forum. Again, they go back to the one world currency. Russia and China and some other countries like the BRIC countries, Brazil, India, and South Africa, and other countries, Saudi Arabia, France, they're all talking about the US dollar and they're not terribly excited about the US dollar. They're trying to figure out ways to usher in other currencies. The problem is our currency is not backed by a gold standard. That was eliminated in Bretton Woods in 1973. As you probably recall, following that elimination, we saw rapid inflation. In fact, Paul Volcker in the early 1980s had to stop this crazy inflation by putting really high interest rates out there. I remember a time when you could get a mortgage with an interest rate of around 18%. We balk at that today, but our mortgage rates have been artificially held down over the past decade. Too low, 0%, 2%. My brother bought a condo over in Germany, and these are not just the US central bank, but other central banks around the world too. But his interest rate for 30 years is 0.5%. 0.5%. So now we're seeing bank failures. And one of the reasons we're seeing bank failures is because, especially these regional banks, is because they're holding all of this mortgage. They're holding these mortgages with very low interest rates. And now the interest rates are rising. Why does the Fed keep hiking up the interest rates? Because they want to curb inflation. They want to curb the idea that the housing market was exploding. And I don't really like the idea that the housing market was exploding because I want my kids to be able to afford a house. But they wanted to stop that. And so what they do is they make debt very unattractive. In other words, if I go to buy a house and the house sells for $500,000 and I can buy it with maybe a 3% interest loan over a 30-year period, it's a very good deal for me. In 1993, when I bought my first house, I was thrilled to get a 7% loan. Today, the loans are going for about 7%. I would have been thrilled with that number in 1993. However, when the interest rates start rising higher, suddenly the $500,000 price tag with the 3% loan, my monthly payments, if the loan comes in at much higher interest rate, my monthly payments are going to be a lot higher. So I can no longer afford the $500,000 house. So I have to negotiate for maybe a $450,000 house at a 7% rate or a $400,000 house. So you can see what's going to happen now. If you want to look into the near future, expect that interest rates are going to rise. What's going on is because we have fiat currencies. They're floating against each other and there's no gold standard to back them up. And so when the government wants to go out and print a lot of money, which it's been doing every time, did it during COVID, does it during wars, does it during all kinds of things. Government goes out and prints money, puts a bunch of money into the market, floods the market with money. What happens then is people start buying more and prices go up. And so unfortunately, we haven't seen the opposite occur where the government is restraining itself. What they call flooding the market with money is called quantitative easing. It's a fancy little tactic. But anyway, I'm sort of digressing here. So I'm going to, yeah, I'm still on about the gold standard. I would say that a very safe bet right now is to invest in gold and to consider gold, to consider hard metals that are of value, consider silver. I'll just tell you why the gold standard is a really strong thing and why it's probably going to come back. If it's not coming back in the United States currency, it will come back in a different currency. One of the reasons is because historically gold has always held its value. Gold always holds value. It can't deteriorate like the dollar physically can deteriorate. If you find gold that was in a ship that says at the bottom of the ocean for a couple hundred years or even a couple thousand years, you bring the gold up and you can still get that gold chunk. It hasn't deteriorated. That's the interesting thing about gold. It's rare. It's fungible. It's a very good source. And so a lot of people peg their currencies against it and have done that historically. And so just watch in the future what happens, because what's going to happen right now is the US dollar is becoming less and less attractive around the world. So that is what I want to say. So thank you everybody for coming in today. I hope you like, subscribe, and do come again. And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Thank you. Is Otangelo in here? If Otangelo's here, I want to say hi to Otangelo. Oh yeah, he is. Yeah, George Orwell, Otangelo. Good to see you. Actually, let me look through these comments here because I missed them. All right, Chiami, good to see you. So let's see what we have here. We've got, I'll just go into here a little bit. So I guess Captive Desk is an atheist or an agnostic, something. He says I don't think he believes in the supernatural. I have joined his channel. I subscribed to his channel because I think at one point he asked me to subscribe to his channel, so I did. The offerings in the Bible are not silly. The Bible is the most sold book in the world. You can look at the Guinness Book of World Records, and there's a good reason for that. It's the only supernaturally driven book in the world that has God's word within it. Yeah, offerings to idols is very dangerous. I agree with you, Susan. And so that's something that's going on there. So Trump's inauguration was rained on. I never said, actually, that's a very good point. Let me make something clear. I didn't say that God doesn't like King Charles. I said God doesn't like pagans. So God rained on King Charles as a way to correspond with the pagans who wanted it to be sunny. He's telling him who's in charge. That's what he's doing. It also rained on my wedding day. I didn't have pagans taking spells on my wedding day, as far as I know, but it rained on my wedding day. Some have said that's good luck. And it also rained on Queen Elizabeth's coronation. And maybe there were pagans way back then trying to chant for sunny days. Who knows? So yeah, that's a misunderstanding of what I said. Satan does exist, and Diogenes, one of the things that has been his greatest trick in the past few hundred years is convincing people that he doesn't exist. And it's very foolish to think that. Go back and look at what the children at Fatima saw on July 13th of 1917. Go back and take a look at that. They were horrified. Mother Mary opened up the gates to hell and showed them what it looks like down there, and they were totally horrified. They started praying. In fact, that's where we get the prayer from Sister Lucia that says, "Oh my Jesus, forgive us our sins. Save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of your mercy." Yeah, Otangelo, I agree. It's like George Orwell's 1984. What's interesting about George Orwell is he was sort of a sympathizer to socialism, which I am not. One thing I've always, even though I was a Democrat, registered Democrat for a while, I have never been in support of anything that gets close to the communism beliefs. Communism is horrible. I actually liked Ayn Rand's book, Atlas Shrugged, because it was talking about a bunch of capitalists who took their capital and moved away from a society where everything that they were producing was going to have to be given back to the commies. And she realized that that was pretty horrible. Now, I'm not a fan of Ayn Rand personally. Apparently, she was sleeping around all the time, and she was a Satanist and an egoist and all this other kind of stuff. But that was a really good book. So it doesn't mean you can't read people's books from different sides of the fence. I think it's a good idea to try to read people's books from other points of view. Yeah, this idea of China's surveillance system is pretty dangerous. If you're in China, you get this thing called social credit scores. So the government's constantly watching you. And if they don't like the fact that you're playing your music too loud, or you bought cigarettes last night, or you did something like that, they can lower your social credit score and prohibit you from traveling around the country or even getting out of the country. They do all sorts of things to monitor people. And we don't want a system like that. We have to push back against that. Do not ever think about the internal ingestion of anything that's going to allow you to be able to have some sort of brain connection to the internet. That's another thing that Klaus Schwab is dancing on around. And it's pretty disgusting idea because it's another way to control people from within your own mind. You don't want that. So that's something else that's out there. So what else do we have here? Yeah, no one pegs their currency to it. We're floating currency. Everyone's pegging their currency to, not everyone, but many countries are pegging their currency to the United States dollar. The gold prize is also not bound on physical gold. And so the gold prize, I'm not sure what you mean right there, Otangelo. So you can, if you just want to clear that up a little bit, I'm not sure exactly what you mean. And so China is a dictatorship. Dictatorships are bad. We agree. Good. Yeah. China's an awful place. Authoritarian. It's led by a person who has gone back to the ideas of Mao Zedong from the 1950s. And remember what happened to China in the 1950s. Millions of people died under that dictatorship. It was only until the 1970s when China started realizing that some aspects of capitalism are good. They used to split up farmland and they would give everybody the same output. So each of the farmers were producing on the farmlands in China. And they told them, okay, everybody work hard. And not everybody did work hard. Some might work hard, some might not. But it didn't matter how hard you worked. Everyone got the same pay. I explain that to my students by saying, if you're in my class, how about if I give all of you C's no matter what you put in? Well, what happens is eventually everyone starts earning D's and F's. And that's basically what happens in places like that. So the Chinese realized that apparently one plot of land at some point, and this is reported by Francis Fukuyama, one plot of land had a bunch of very industrious Chinese who decided that let's split this up. Let's each be held responsible for our particular little teeny portion within this larger plot of land that has been given to us to farm. And so they started being extremely industrious, and the Chinese government got kind of embarrassed by that. And they realized that that aspect of capitalism isn't a bad thing, which is why the Chinese government opened up to free markets in certain ways, and why you see what you see now there. And so, okay, currencies were bound to physical gold held by the governments. That is gone as well. Yes, I know that is gone. That's absolutely gone. That was wiped out here in the United States in 1973. Officially, but it was also wiped out earlier than that in a more connected way in the 1930s. You'll notice one of the reasons these governments have wiped out the gold standard is because they wanted to go print money. And a lot of times that's during wars. So they realize they don't have enough money to fund the wars. They want to just print money, flood the economy with money, devalue the currency, and cause inflation. It's a big problem, and it's an ongoing problem, because we keep seeing it. It happened, of course, during the financial collapse in 2008 when we were bailing out the banks. It's happened now under the COVID thing. It happened with the Ukraine war. It just keeps happening. So we keep printing money. And it's like we've gone. When people don't remember this, but when Reagan was in office, it was horrible because we went to $1 trillion debt. Okay, $1 trillion is a lot of money. And then under Obama, we went from about $10 trillion to about $20 trillion in debt. Okay, that's pretty awful. But right now, because of COVID, under Trump and Biden, now this is not a Democrat or Republican thing. We've got problems on both sides. This is a bipartisan problem. Because now, as you know, we're up to $31 trillion in debt. Just to put this in perspective and to really understand what this means. A lot of the debt is owed to U.S. people. Much of the debt is owed to people in the United States through various forms, like entitlements and that kind of thing. But also going back is we only take in about $4 trillion of what they call income. Government income isn't government working hard to earn an honest living. That's not what it is. Government income comes in from our taxes. So if the government takes in, say, $4 trillion to balance the budget, that means that it's going to also spend $4 trillion. Sadly, the government hasn't been doing that. They've been spending more than $4 trillion. So they're taking in $4 trillion. They're spending, say, $6 trillion, and the excess is going to the debt service. That's the problem. That's why we're up to $31 trillion. But anyway, yes, he says, I will be on 9 p.m. Thursday this week doing an interview, SJ, if you are free to come by. So yes, who are you interviewing? Who are you interviewing, Captive Desk? I would like to hear that. Maybe we'll hear that in just a moment. So anyway, I want to say thank you to people. Diagoras of Melos, I would be happy to jump in until I actually see who you are. All I see you as is sort of a bot, because you don't have an identity. You don't use your name. I haven't seen what you look like. Like, I actually have seen Captive Desk, and Captive Desk is a real human. I saw his face. I saw him talk. This is a real human. And so I'm much more likely to have a real human on my channel than someone who is not showing up on a channel and showing the face. Okay. So I would have to actually see your face if you want to come on my channel. That's the way it works. That's the ground rules. I don't want to hear a voice and have some sort of a meme up there, some sort of an avatar. I don't want that. I want a face, an actual face. And so that's just a policy. And I put forth that policy because I saw something crazy on Rebecca's channel, Bread of Life, when she had some guy get on there and he started flashing pictures, nudie pictures. And, I don't want that kind of thing on my channel. I think it's really inappropriate. Not to say that Diagoras is going to do something like that, but I just think it's much safer when you run a channel to make sure that you know who the person is. You've seen what they look like. You're not talking to an avatar or something like that. And so it's just a policy that I have. It's a relatively new policy, but you'll notice I haven't had the open forums in a while. And one reason is because I had somebody get on my forum and ask something incredibly rude. So I had to cut off that portion of the open chat. And I realized I can't have people who don't show their faces on my channel again. So anyways, thank you everybody for coming in. Please like, subscribe, and come again. And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do it all for God's glory. Thank you. Bye-bye.